Okay, so these are key concepts then. So this is the what of the accommodation theory, what Howard Giles contributed. So in other words, people will adapt and adopt their language in order to achieve these things, closeness with each other or distance. Now, the starting point of speakers, okay, so I will illustrate this in a little bit more using some familiar faces for you shortly. But for example then, if we start with blood brothers, ooh. Now, the starting point of speakers. So if you think of Mickey with his strong Liverpudlian accent, okay, there's the stigma, the stereotype associated with his Liverpudlian accent. Mickey, I love you. That he is himself working class, uneducated. And that accent becomes a part of the stigma that he carries, the stigma of being from a low economic kind of background, the attitude and belief that he is somehow less able, less full of potential, less promise. So his starting point is already quite low. So somebody like Mickey, if he was demonstrating upward convergence, would maybe try and change the way he speaks. So he might try and get rid of his Liverpudlian accent. He might try and adopt one of the more neutral accents that we look at called received pronunciation. He might try and use language and vocabulary that was seemingly more academic or intelligent. And if Mickey wanted to change the way others saw him, he might have gone down the route of changing the way he spoke, demonstrating upward convergence, his starting point already being quite low, that of a person who has a strong regional accent that is stigmatized and associated with low intelligence, and he might try and move away from that. Now, if we take Edward, now Edward's starting point as a speaker is different. When we first meet Edward in Blood Brothers, isn't it? He's using what we call received pronunciation. He's using what we call proper English, and he's speaking very well. But interestingly, Edward demonstrates downward convergence. Okay, as little moments in the play, you might remember when he starts to swear and he starts to try and adopt the language of Mickey. He actually is really aspirational towards Mickey's language. He hears how Mickey talks and he wants to speak like that. So interestingly, Edward demonstrates downward convergence. He wants to move towards Mickey. He wants to create solidarity and a bond with Mickey by finding a way to speak like him. And that's where we see different types of convergence. Now, mutual convergence could just be, fast forward you guys, it's your first week at university for you in about 1.5 years time, maybe, or 2 years time. You're moving into halls of residence, but you've gone somewhere like Wales or Liverpool or Newcastle, and you might find that you're in a halls of residence with yourself. You're from Plymouth, to a point. You've got somebody there from Wales. You've got somebody there from their hometown, so they're from Newcastle or Liverpool. So you've got already quite a variation of different ways of speaking. But you're all in the same starting point in that you're all away from home for the first time, and you're all desperate to build relationships, create solidarity and a bond with each other because you're going to feel safer. So we might see what we call mutual convergence, that you might all start to talk similarly. You might start to pick up from each other vocabulary and expressions. You might find that you all have little phrases that create that bond between you. So then we would have mutual convergence. Okay? Now, that's just one way to illustrate those findings. So again, you can make these notes, you can write these down into your own words. You could turn this really easily into a Quizlet. What is convergence? Convergence is adaptation in speech to move closer to each other. So there is a way that you can abbreviate, yeah? Does convergence close or increase the speech gap? Would become another way of getting the understanding, but a different type of question. Now, I did use this word, and we will come back to it, stigma, okay, when we're looking at divergence here. So sometimes within your Quizlet cards, it could be a word and a definition. So stigma is a word that's not just used in A-level language, but it's the idea that people can be marked out negatively for being different. So if you carry a stigma, it's like a social mark, something that others perceive to mark you out in a negative way. So we talk about stigma, and we talk about being stigmatized. Now, when we look at the attitudes, remember our starting questions, what are the attitudes towards language variation? There are certain types of speech that is stigmatized, that have certain stigmas attached. So Mickey's Liverpudlian accent was stigmatized. It was seen as marking him out as being socially inferior to Edward. And the danger with stigmas is that they often play into stereotypes, this false way of assuming all people can, or all types of people within a particular group are the same. So stereotype is equally dangerous in many ways as a stigma. Okay, so that's a good word to remember or make a note of if you've not seen it before. Okay, now just to illustrate. Now, once you know your theory for a C grade, who they are, what they are, one of the best ways is to secure the C, B, and the A is what we call the illustrated example phase. Some people get so fixated on learning who the theorist is and how they did it, they forget this bit. So big like, whoop, whoop, we need to be able to illustrate with examples our theories for the higher grades, okay? So we've already said that convergence is people adapting their communication behaviours to establish common ground. So this might then, just to build on this, might include vocal tone, so volume, so those phonological features and word choices. So as I said, two students in a halls of residence beginning to use the same vocab, accent and tone as each other. But we actually have two, what we would call cultural examples of divergence and convergence. So you might recognise these photos, you might not, but we're going to just think about Prince Harry and Prince William as an illustration of convergence, and similarly David Beckham, okay, as an illustration of accommodation. You might not have thought of it, David Beckham. Now, what we see then in these two examples is convergence and divergence just kind of being played out. So divergence accentuating the linguistic differences between self and others. So it's a way to show that you value yourself as different. This can help to sustain a positive image of one's in-group and hence to strengthen one's social identity. Divergence is commonly used to establish dominance, authority, or power in an interaction. So a teacher will use different language strategies within the classroom. Now, did you know, we'll come back to David Beckham and Harry in a minute, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Okay, so accommodation, it's adjusting to a style that they have little or no experience in, which can often be a result of stereotyping. So some examples is when we speak to old people like they're babies, okay, or we speak very slowly or simply when communicating with someone who's not fluent in our language. So over accommodation is often tied in with somebody who has good intentions, but it can actually further alienate themselves from others. They come across as maybe trying too hard or inauthentic or fake. Okay, so we're going to look here. Now, this is an extract from a newspaper publication. Now, this was an article that was written about Prince William and Harry, and it illustrates this issue of convergence and divergence. So as I read it to you, you're going to answer these questions at the end in your own words. Who is the focus of this article? How are they speaking? So what aspects of speech, ways in which they're speaking are being picked up by the writer? And what reasons does the writer give? Are you ready? Okay. Etiquette expert William Hanson told Female Prince Harry's accent was an evidence of a trend among younger members of upper sets to speak less correctly than their parents and grandparents, in an effort to fit in and not alienate themselves from others. It's one thing for the princes to soften their accent, but a real shame for Prince Harry to start saying ain't so repeatedly, which, regardless of what accent it is said in, is just incorrect English. The Duchess of Cambridge, being from a non-royal background, has almost perfect RP English, which is often the case with middle and upper class English families, he said. In the past, Kate's former Marlborough College classmates have said her voice became posher and posher while she was a teen, and posher still after marriage. Now, according to some onlookers, it's even plummier than her old Etonian husband's. While William has added a touch of estuary English to sound suitably everyman, his wife has chosen to adopt old-fashioned received pronunciation. Now, guys, there's some ideas here that become the bedrock and we build on them. But just as a quick reading and reflection, in your own words, who's the focus of this article? What three names are we given? Okay. Now, each of those names are associated with a slightly different way of speaking. So just record how they are speaking, what ways of speech they're being associated with. Now, in this article, they begin to suggest reasons why. So why? So I'm going to do one, but you're going to do the other two. So really quickly, I'm just going to zoom on Prince Harry. So who's the focus of paragraph 1, Prince Harry? How are they speaking? Well, apparently, okay, he's speaking less correctly than parents. Okay, he's using the word ain't. He's softened his accent. So all of those to do with the ways Harry's speaking. Why? Well, apparently it's in an effort to fit in and not alienate himself from others. So for us then, we can begin to think, well, that's downward convergence. Prince Harry is convergence. He's downward convergence. He's moving away from the language of his parents and he's moving towards another social group. He wants to fit in and alienate himself with another social group, not his parents and grandparents, but somebody else. Okay, so you've got to do that now, but think how you would do it for the two other people mentioned in this article. Okay, off you go. Okay, so who were the other people? Right, we have got the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton. So she's the focus of that middle paragraph. Now, what she's doing, how she's speaking, she's using perfect RP. But a little bit further down, it says that actually over time, her speech has changed and she's got posher and posher. So look at that adjective choice, posher and posher is being repeated there and it's linked to this RP English. Okay, now why? Now, it doesn't come out with an immediate why, but if we were thinking about it, okay, could we give a reason? Well, Kate, it says there, is from a middle-class background, and now she's married into royalty. So she might be wanting to converge towards that new social group that she's found herself apart with. She could be wanting to diverge away from the stigma of being middle class. There we go. So, last one, what did you get? Brilliant. So we've got William. Okay, now how's he speaking? So it says down here, it uses this term, touch of estuary English to sound suitably everyman. So how's William speaking? Like everyman. He's speaking estuary English. Now for this one, we've got to kind of really be inferring. So why do we think William might want to sound like everyman? Why doesn't he want to sound as posh or as proper or as RP as his father or as his wife Kate? Why might he want to do that? Who might he want to create a bond with or solidarity with? Who is the everyman? Now, actually, it's quite a complex one, this really, because over time, the position of the royal family has shifted. And it was seen that with both Harry and William, there was a conscious shift towards us everyday people, that there was a sense in which they adapted the way they spoke so that they didn't come across as so elite and as so distant. And who did Harry and William want to fit in with and not alienate themselves from? The public, from us, from the subjects that they will one day rule. Now, again, complex personal factors. Some people believe this was a result of the influence of their mother, Princess Diana, the people's princess. Some people think it was wanting to diverge a little away from the stigma. There was a stigmatization of the royalty, that they were not really worth the money we paid for them in taxes, that their jobs were kind of redundant. So it's almost like William and Harry have tried to re-identify with us as the public. They've tried to re-identify with us that they're not so different. And one of the ways they've done that is through their speech. We then have Kate demonstrating the opposite process, trying to sound posher than she really is in order to fit in with that idea of being royalty. So it's just this lovely example of the accommodation theory and practice here. And we also have this lovely sense of, this lovely sense of complexity again. It's never as simple. Okay, now, last but not least, let's have a look at this one. Okay, in your own words, who's changed their accent and why have they changed? How have they changed? Would you link this to upward or downward convergence? And what are they diverging away from? So Posh really does live up to her nickname. Researchers reveal the Beckhams have changed their accents to sound less working class. Researchers analysed YouTube videos from before and after the high-profile couple's 2007 move to America. Found Victoria more likely to pronounce the L at the end of words such as all, and David was less likely to drop his H's and use Cockney-sounding vowel sounds. Okay, so guys, go for your answers. Okay, so who's changed? We're looking at the Beckhams, Posh and David, or David and Victoria. So how have they changed? Well, according to this, they've changed their accents. Why? To sound less working class. So what are they diverging away from? They're diverging away from the stigmatization of being working class. Okay, now if we were looking at how they've changed, there's a little bit more detail there. Victoria is more likely to pronounce the L at the end of words. David is less likely to drop his H's. So is this upward or downward convergence? This is upward. They're moving towards a desirable form of language. Okay, guys, so that's our work for today. I'll see you next lesson.